Thank you for joining me today. I'm really pleased today to do something a little different with one of our focus on, a long slideshow and a demo and things like that. I'm going to do something slightly different today. This is the only slide that you'll see on this session. And I'm pleased today to be able to share with you a conversation between two people who spend a lot of time thinking about the security of Active Directory from very different perspectives. First, we've got Aidan Simister. He is the CEO of Lepide, and he works, as you would imagine, very closely with organizations all around the world that are trying to improve their visibility, control access across their identity systems, data access, and Active Directory environments. And joining him today for this conversation is Spencer Alessi. And Spencer is a former sysadmin who now works as a penetration tester, helping IT and security teams make their AD and Windows environments harder to attack. And through internal penetration tests and assumed breach engagements, he spends a lot of time seeing how attackers actually move through environments once they get inside. Today's conversation I'm going to share with you is a conversation about what Spencer is seeing in real environments, the kinds of weaknesses that he sees coming up most often, how attackers are really taking advantage of them, and what organizations should really focus on first. The only housekeeping I'll do before I hand it over to the conversation is everybody's going to be remaining muted on the session, but if you do have any questions that you'd like Spencer or Aidan to answer, please just pop them into the questions pane. I will do my best to manage that as we go along. With this session is also recorded, and you should receive the recording automatically via a GoToWebinar email tomorrow. So with that being said, without any further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Aidan to begin the conversation with Spencer. And I hope you enjoy this. Some really valuable insights in there. So over to you.
Spencer, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me. I really appreciate it. Just before we get started, I'll just could you just perhaps introduce yourself and explain a little bit about who you are and what you've done? That'd be really helpful.
Yeah, no, thanks. I appreciate it. I'm in New York State here in the United States, and I can see kind of out your window, by the way, Aidan. It looks a little foggy.
Yes.
It's exactly the same weather here. And I thought that was funny. This morning I was looking outside, I'm like, it's foggy here. And I'm like, I wonder if it's like that where you are.
Wet and gray.
That's exactly what it is here in New York. So I don't know what it is. It's like we're meeting halfway here on this podcast. So I love it. So I appreciate you having me on. Yeah, my name is Spencer. I am a senior pen tester currently, but I'm a former sysadmin. I jokingly say I'm a recovering sysadmin because I spent many years doing Windows administration, Active Directory administration, server admin, sysadmin type work. I used to work at an insurance company, so I got my hands into a lot of different technologies, and I kind of came up the ranks from help desk to sysadmin, and then I was in charge of security there for a while, and then I made the pivot to the consulting world, and now I get to kind of like attack and dismantle Active Directory and internal networks for fun, but more importantly, kind of help IT admins pick up the pieces, kind of fix stuff, remediate stuff. And my core kind of like mission statement for my content and like the stuff that I do recently is all about helping IT admins make their environments harder to attack. Like if I had to put a pin in it, that would be the thing. So that's what I'm really passionate about. So I appreciate you having me on here to chat about this stuff.
Thanks, Spencer. Thank you. Appreciate it. Just for context, I'll just give you a little bit of background about me and why I'm here, really. So I'm the CEO and co-founder of Lepide. I've worked in cybersecurity for probably 25, 26 years now. And I really co-founded Lepide because I felt that security was broken. I felt I could see so much money, so much effort being invested into trying to prevent breaches, trying to prevent attacks, and yet I saw very few controls in place around Active Directory very specifically, and I just felt something was completely wrong. Like we weren't putting enough of our effort into Active Directory specifically, and I'm like, until we start taking Active Directory seriously, this problem is never going to get solved. So certainly back in 2015, we built a set of tools to help organizations get that better visibility and control over Active Directory. Active Directory is in my DNA, it's in our DNA as a company, and that's sort of a so I care hugely about solving this problem. And certainly when I follow all of your things on LinkedIn and I see all that great content you're putting out there around the importance of this, like, this is somebody we have to talk to. So yeah, very much like I think we're really kind of coming from the same position in that AD really matters. If your AD is wrong, everything's wrong. That's certainly the way that I feel about this topic anyway.
Absolutely. And, in my day job at Secure IT 360, where I do pen testing, we see this all the time where a company will hire us for an external pen test. It'll go well. We'll find some stuff. They'll fix it. And then they'll be like, oh, should I do other pen testing? Or like, have you done an internal before? And they're like, what's an internal? Then like, okay. And then the first time we do an internal pen test for somebody, it's like crazy because we find all these things that are very much low hanging fruit. You can fix in a week, in a couple weeks. But it's the things that attackers are taking advantage of in these environments. And, there's still, as much as people are moving to Entra and the cloud and SaaS, there's still quite a bit of on-prem Active Directory infrastructure out there, and it's not going away anytime soon. So the need for resources, pen testing tools to manage Active Directory, to detect threats, and to identify misconfigurations and things like that are just so important. And it obviously aligns really well with what I do and what I preach. So I think just super important.
Yeah, I totally agree. So let's just sort of step back a second. So why is so much of your focus drawn to Active Directory? Because this is something that's sort of like really specific that you're involved in as a pen tester, and quite a lot of pen test companies, like, they aren't that explicit around that area. Why have you sort of chosen that as like a real area of specialization for you?
Yeah, the short answer is because that's what I grew up on in like IT admin world. Was I got my first job as help desk, and that organization had Active Directory. And I was, one of my first tasks as a help desk analyst or help desk technician was creating new accounts. Like you get the new user slip and you're like, okay, create the account, create the password with the default password that we use for all accounts, right? Bad, obviously, but that was what we did in the day. So that's where I got my feet wet, and I just really gravitated to how mature it is and how stable it's been over the 20 something years. I think it's been alive. I think they just had their 20th anniversary, I think, or 25th anniversary, just like last year. It's surprisingly stable. It's it works, right? And there's very few technologies that you can honestly say like have been around for so long and have just without a lot of updates have worked pretty well. So that's the short answer, is because that's what I grew up on, and I kind of grew a fondness to it. And then the other answer is there's not a lot of people making content and talking about Active Directory online, at least, right? So I see that as kind of a niche for me personally, like, oh, I'm going to talk about Active Directory and Active Directory security because that, directly leads to the people that I think I can help with content and with the pen testing that I do. So it's kind of a two-pronged answer. One is I really enjoy Active Directory. I love the technology and I like the nerdiness of it. But then also from a content perspective, it's a nice little niche to talk about Active Directory, even if it's kind of dwindling in kind of popularity because of AI and Claude and Open Claude, all that.
Yeah, but I think one of the things that getting the fundamentals and the foundations right are so important. And I think one of the things
Yeah.
I find really interesting is, you look, the average security team have got what, 30 or 40 different tools in their stack, and they've got all their latest and greatest. But when you're asking some quite fundamental questions around, just tell me about what you know around your Active Directory and the controls and the visibility you have around your Active Directory, sometimes you get like, yeah, that's we can't really answer those questions. And I'm like, well, like, we all know, I mean, everyone's heard this, the identity is the new perimeter and all of this, but it's true. If you don't have the right controls in place around your Active Directory, you've just left the key under the mat. Like, having all those other controls are kind of going to waste unless you get your Active Directory in order.
Yeah, and one of the things that I see regularly is organizations are going to Entra, they're going hybrid,
Of course.
but they're maintaining that Active Directory infrastructure, right? And a lot of them are hybrid synced, meaning
Cool.
the password that the users are using is the same for Entra as it is for Active Directory because they're syncing, right? And Active Directory is still their source of truth. Well, now Active Directory is even more important, right? Because it's synced to Entra. There's a hybrid connection there. And honestly, what I see a lot of times is an educational slash marketing problem with security, right? I do a pen test and I find some things and the client is like, "Oh, I never even knew that was a thing." Right? It's like when you are coming up in IT world and in help desk and sysadmin world, there's not a lot of like training and curriculum for that, right? Like there's the Microsoft certifications and there's Security Plus and there's things like that, but there's not like sysadmin security training where you're going to learn about these different things. A lot of it is offensive focus. It's like red teamers and pen testers that are trying to teach and train blue teamers and IT admins about this stuff. So a lot of times the reason that I like creating content and talking about stuff and doing podcasts is it helps people become aware of the risks and the threats that are out there and kind of
Mm,
the hidden dangers that Active Directory presents itself.
mm.
And that's one of the interesting pieces to it. So I think it's many times when I talk to IT admins, it's like an educational thing. Like they didn't know about it. And then once they know about it, they're like, oh, now I can address it and figure out ways
Yeah.
to kind of handle those problems.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I remember when I used to go to these various different security events. I remember going RSA, and everyone was sort of a little bit kind of, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, maybe almost a bit blasé about Active Directory. Like, oh yeah, yeah, like it's okay, fine, right? Whereas now I think that like people really realise that like AD is the cornerstone of everything. Like it is so fundamental to security. Like it is critical that we get that right. And I think that it's fascinating now that I think that we're actually now in a position where, like I think also it's probably driven by the fact that attackers realize that as well. Hackers realize that,
Mhm.
like we've seen like a massive rise in attacks on on-prem AD over the last sort of year or so, like a huge rise. And I don't really know what's driven that, but the amount of organizations that we've been speaking to have been like that are now taking their Active Directory serious as a result of having had an issue. Shouldn't have to come to that, of course, but that is the reality.
Yep.
We're human beings. We operate in that way. That's so something has to happen before we do something about it, and that's just the reality of it. But there's been a massive rise in attacks on AD. I don't know whether that's something that you've seen in your experience as
I
well.
think it's a visibility thing. Security tools have gotten a lot better. I will tell
Yeah.
you, as an internal pen tester, I go up against EDR every single engagement. We're up against
Uh-huh.
CrowdStrike and Defender for Endpoint and Sentinel One, and all those different EDR products. In addition to MDR providers and SOCs, like the
Mm.
professional SOCs and MSPs, right, that are monitoring these environments, and we go up against those every single week. And I can tell you, over the last 4 years of doing this, I've pen tested over like 130 organizations in the last 4 years. I did 1,000 hours alone of pen testing just last year. I can tell you that security products are getting better. EDR has gotten a lot better. Egress controls have gotten a lot better. All of the typical security tools that blue teams are using, the SIM, threat detection, it's all getting better. And I think what's happening is we're seeing more of these attacks because we have
Mm.
more visibility and the tooling is better to be able to observe those attacks, detect them, and hopefully thwart many of them or some of them at least. But I think part of it's a visibility thing where there's more happening because we're able to see more of it. Whereas in the past, these organizations would get attacked, they'd get ransomed, and it wouldn't be in the news because it wasn't really a thing yet to be newsworthy. But then once
Yeah.
ransomware groups got into the mix, right, and they started publicly, blackmailing these organizations, now it becomes more public, and we're investing more resources into making these attacks more visible. And there's a whole industry with threat intel and ransomware. Like it's become very industrialized, if you will.
Mm.
So I think we're seeing more of it. Not necessary, maybe not necessary that it's increasing, although the signals are there that there are more and more every single day. But I do think some of it's like a visibility thing where we can see more of it now because the tools have gotten better.
I see. So because we're able to see more and get more visibility and get more, then we're able to then make better decisions because we're like, oh, well, this actually genuinely is like a significant vector of attack. So we need to put more of our emphasis and focus here. So when I think about what it is that's sort of driving more of our conversations, that is probably coming as a result of the fact that they've had various different tools that have helped them identify some type of attack or an issue, and they've looked at it further and say, okay, well, actually at the core of this, Active Directory is like, is tier 0 here, and that's driving more mature programs, more better adoption, better controls in general around the Active Directory. I think that's sort of your perspective on this, then, yeah.
Yeah, and I think security is kind of having a renaissance in many ways because we saw this with OpenClaw or ClaudeBot, if you're familiar with that, this wave that took the world by storm, right? Everybody was deploying these Claude bots, and then there was a community of security people and researchers and stuff that were like, wait a minute, like these things can go on the internet, like there are they can run these skills and like they have access to your accounts. Like, hold on a minute, like there's probably some security risks here, and there are, right? And so I think a lot of people are kind of realizing that if you just give unfettered access, that's probably not the best approach, and there should be some guardrails and there should be some limitations there. So I think in many ways, this whole ClaudeBot thing has made people realize that security actually is really important. And unless we want things to just go completely haywire and off the rails completely and like have AI bots taking over the world, we probably need some guardrails and some security implemented into these processes and these environments. So I think that's helped quite a bit and I think it's helped security be kind of a more easily talked about mainstream, because if you remember, like 20 years ago, 30 years ago, InfoSec and cybersecurity wasn't really a thing. Like before my time, cybersecurity like wasn't a thing, but now, cybersecurity is a whole industry. There's the different disciplines and niches within it. So I think we're seeing a resurgence of security, and I think AI has helped with that a little bit to kind of gain more popularity on the topic. And then, IT admins, IT directors, CISOs, they're kind of like, okay, yeah, we need to pay attention to this. Board of directors and regulatory bodies are holding those people more accountable now, right? You can't get insurance without having a cybersecurity program, a written program, and having policies and procedures. So there's a lot that's happening, I think, that's making security more of a focus and more of like a leadership level discussion.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing. I also think there's quite an exercise going on right now where there's quite a lot of organizations that are getting rid of products and they're scaling down their tools, that they're like, well, this isn't fixing the biggest problems that we've got. I think a lot of security teams are just drowning in tools. They've got too many tools, too little time, too many alerts, too many dashboards, and they're like, I don't know where to start with any of this. I don't know how any of this actually relates to the actual problem that we're trying to solve here. And I think that, certainly, I think obviously budgets have come under scrutiny for some organizations as well. So I think that getting back to basics, which again, I'm incredibly biased, but like fundamentally, like identity is one of the fundamental pillars of getting security right, and Active Directory is one of the fundamental pillars of identity. So this, in my opinion, is like, this is one of the first places that organizations should think about starting when it comes to being effective for their security. And I think that's definitely been driving that behavior as well.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, it's a kind of a cliche saying like single pane of glass, right? And if we just take it for what it is, right? It makes sense that you would consolidate into as few systems as you possibly could have that all still allow you to be effective at whatever it is you're doing, right? Whether it's identity, infrastructure, DevSecOps, whatever you're doing, right? In the case of identity, right, if you have, multiple different systems, one of those systems is going to be the system that you go to all the time, and then the other two are just going to be neglected, right? Like you're just not going to look at them that much unless you're getting email notifications or something like that, or something is prompting you to go look at them. And I see this with my job too. It's like we'll go into an environment and they have a lot of different things, but they only use a very few select tools, right? And a lot of it is wasted, or they buy tools that just have one feature and it has all these other features. So I'll give you a great example. back when I was in IT, I was looking at a password manager and or a password vault, like privilege access management system, right? I went down the rabbit hole, and those PAM systems have a ton of features, right? Like you can auto rotate credentials and you can scan for them and check them in, check them out. You can record the session, like tons of features, right? But what I really just wanted to start was just a password vault, right? For privileged accounts. I didn't need all those other things to do what I was just trying to do initially. I think that's some of the traps that we fall into as IT people is we see kind of like the fancy bells and whistles of a product and we're like, oh, we need that. And then we buy it and we end up not using it. And then it just becomes kind of shelfware, right? Where it might be better to consolidate into fewer systems that do as much as you can, or as most of the things that you need it to do, and start working at it from there.
Definitely great. So one of the things that you were mentioning earlier, Spencer, is that you've done over 100 pen tests, right? Now, perhaps just take a minute to sort of look into that. Like, what are the things that you generally looking for, and what are the things that you find generally? Like, what are the main things that you commonly see when you're doing these pen tests that lead to clear gaping holes and possible breaches?
Yeah, one of the most common issues that I see lately, when I say lately, I mean within the last couple of years, has been certificate abuse or certificate issues.
Okay.
So Active Directory certificate services, it's the PKI infrastructure for Active Directory that has a number of flaws. I think they're up to like 19 different flaws within ADCS. So that is far and away the most common, and the worst of it happens to be the most common issue that I see, and that's called ESC1 and escalation 1, and it essentially allows you to impersonate any user in the domain. And you can do it from any domain showing system. It's point and click. It's very trivial to abuse, but that's the most common issue that I see in internal environments, Active Directory environments, is Active Directory certificate services issues. And that, like I said, it's very easy to abuse and to exploit, unfortunately, because it's so widespread and so common.
Okay. And when you're going in and doing these pen tests, how many of them would you say, what percentage of them would you say have got either severe or critical issues that need to get fixed?
I would say probably 70 to 80% have critical findings. So probably around 70 to 80% of engagements that we do have at least one critical finding. It's not always ADCS. It might be, there's an admin credential on a file share. It might be, that they're reusing passwords on all their machines in their environment, right? And it gives us access to a server or whatever else. So there's a lot of different criteria that could make a critical vulnerability. And a lot of it depends on the context, right? If we're able to abuse that to elevate privileges or to move laterally, that raises the severity of the finding. But I would say, in terms of just aggregating all of the pen tests together, critical findings appear in probably 70 to 80% of engagements, with ADCS, Active Directory Certificate Services, being like the top one that we see most often.
Right. And are the organizations you do pen tests with generally surprised? Do they typically think they're in a reasonable state until you get in there?
It kind of runs the gamut. Some of them kind of know the skeletons that are hiding. And in fact, one of the things I do in a kickoff call is I ask them where the skeletons are. I'm like, listen, I'm going to find them. It's just a matter of time. So if you want to tell me, I can help you get the resources you need, or help articulate things in a way that help you, show leadership that this is actually more of a problem than they originally thought. Because many times, we'll do pen tests, and the organization is working on getting more budget for hiring another security person or another IT person, or buying a tool, right, that they really think they need. So we can help them by saying, hey, this is a really big problem. Here's the abuse. Here's an example of us kind of going through and abusing it. And we can use the pen test in that way to help IT teams kind of secure additional resources in that way. But that's something that's really beneficial about that whole process. And it's a way to help organizations kind of get what they need. And by telling us where the skeletons are, I can kind of help kind of poke those things out. But in some cases, organizations don't know. It's the first time
Mm.
they've done an internal pen test and they don't really know what to expect. And they are kind of shocked at the findings and how easy some of these abuses are. They're
Mm.
kind of taken aback. And then other organizations are like very confident. They're like, you're not going to find anything. We're good. Like we've tested this before. And then we'll go in and it's like, it's a bloodbath, right? Like it's just really bad. So usually the common thread is the ones that are overconfident are the worst, are in the worst shape. And the ones that are like, yeah, no, I think we're all right, but we could definitely do better. They're the ones that are actually doing better in reality. So it's kind of this interesting dichotomy, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, well, we don't do pen tests. I mean, but we do in our processes run sort of risk assessments, and the amount of times where we enter the process and they think like, no, 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 this we got this. When you get into it, you're like, right,
Yeah.
okay, so all these users with admin privileges that haven't logged on for 2 years. You got like all these inactive users, all these password policies that are out of sync. Like just very, 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 and you're absolutely right. It's usually the ones that are really overconfident are the ones where we find the most amount of issues and problems. It's
Yep.
yeah, fascinating to
A lot
see.
of it's legacy technical debt, like
Of
stuff that's
course.
just kind of
They've
been left out
merged,
there.
companies have shifted around, they've merged with other companies, they've got multiple sites,
Yep.
and over time it's just sort of like got out of control. And we see this so often as well. Yeah,
Yeah. It's debt and tribal knowledge too. Like, the senior IT admin who was there for 20 years leaves
that's
and he
it.
leaves with all the information in his head and
That's
didn't
right.
document a whole lot. It's
Indeed.
like, you got to figure it out.
Indeed. So when you're engaging, so you're running a pen test on generally, I think your clients tend to be on the larger side, but you're running a pen test on this type of organization. How many of them are able to actually detect and respond, would be effectively in a real world scenario able to stop your approach?
Yeah. So it's much lower than the percentage of critical findings. So in most engagements, organizations are able to detect at least some things that are happening.
Yeah, yeah,
Typically it's the most noisy and malicious things like Kerber roasting,
of course.
when you're Kerber roasting a bunch of accounts, right? And when I say bunch, I mean at least like 5 or more, 10 or more or so. That broad spectrum Kerber roasting is
Mm,
pretty noisy, right? It's easy
yeah,
to detect by most systems nowadays.
sure, sure.
Same with password spraying, the real noisy stuff. Most organizations can detect those because those are kind of out of the box.
Of course,
Where
yeah.
we see a lot of organizations lacking is when stuff becomes, when you don't have the detection out of the box. So a good
Mm,
example is enumeration, Active Directory enumeration specifically. So I, as an attacker, when I'm in your environment, I'm looking for accounts to attack. I'm looking for maybe computers to attack. I'm looking for things in the environment, right? And I'm poking at things. A lot of that kind of blends into typical traffic in an environment.
yeah.
And if you haven't tuned your systems, if you haven't gone through a pen test before or a purple team, you likely don't have detections for these things. So all of that reconnaissance activity leading up to when I start abusing that activity is usually not detected by most organizations. And then the actual abuses of those is kind of hit or miss. It's like 50%. Some
Mm,
organizations will see me abusing these Active Directory issues and some of them won't. And that's more along the lines of like 50-50 if they're going to see it or not. But from
mm,
an enumeration standpoint, like think about all the stuff that a threat actor does before they actually abuse something is typically not seen. And then we have this small window where there's some abuse actions happening. Well, probably 50% are seeing that. And then, the noisy stuff, is seen in most organizations.
mm. Interesting. And would you say that generally people tend to engage your services after something bad has already happened, or is it preventative or is it proactive, would you say, and when they'll engage you?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's both.
Mm.
We have both scenarios. Many times, for me personally, with internals, right, it's a lot different from external, right? Because regulatory requirements, client requirements, industry frameworks, they all say you should do pen testing. So the easy thing to do is just to do an external pen test, right? It's the easiest lift for most organizations. They don't have to do a whole lot. It's usually the least expensive option as well. But what I see is that organizations come to us and they're like, hey, we just had ransomware last year and we've kind of picked back up the pieces, but we noticed in kind of doing that instant response and kind of the recovery efforts that there were a lot of issues that were pointed out to us by the defer firm, right? Like, oh, they Kerberoasted, they cracked a weak password, and the server admin account was the same on all machines. Like, there's a lot of like, low-hanging fruit hygiene stuff that they had to work on to clean up. So that's where I usually come in many times, is the organization will have had an incident. They'll come to us and be like, I know I need to address this internal stuff and, figure out where my risks are internally. So I'm going to do an internal pen test. So that is definitely like a large number of customers. But more recently now, I think people are realizing that they need to be proactive, kind of like the security renaissance I was talking about. There are more and more every week of customers coming to us saying, like, I know I need to not just pen test externally. I know I need to look internally. I know I need to look at cloud. I know I need to address these things. And I know that security assessments are one thing, GRC is one thing, but pen testing is a whole nother thing. And it's good to do both, right? And it's really important to do both.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. So what are the, we've spoken about this before, but like you've mentioned a few times about excessive permissions as well. Like, is that a really common problem that you are seeing when you're going into environments? Yeah.
Yeah, completely. So one of the things I look for is like, if you're familiar with tiering, so folks listening, tiered security, right? It's where you set silos for different levels of access in your environment, right? So Susie in accounting has a different level of access from Steve, the domain admin, right? And ideally you have, different levels in between those two. But what I see oftentimes is a good example is help desk, right? They need to be able to reset passwords, maybe create computer accounts and do some like light administration in the environment. But inadvertently, they might be members of a group like account operators or backup operators or something like that. Some group that gives them kind of unintended admin access. And they inadvertently might be able to reset admin account credentials or service accounts, or there's just misconfigured delegations or ACLs, right? Where you set up a specific permission and you accidentally give the wrong group. So instead of domain admins, right, maybe you put in domain users and you're just like, you didn't have enough coffee that day, right? And you just put it in, right? And it's like, I've seen that so many times. I can't tell you how many times it's just purely been a mistake. It's like, oh, we meant to put domain admins in that group, not domain users. So stuff like that happens all the time. And it's a combination of like just inadvertent group membership, but then like distinct delegated rights or permissions on specific objects or groups or files and folders and stuff.
So if there were like 2 or 3 things that you'd recommend, what are the like 2 or 3 really common recommendations that come out of your pen test that we could tell people to kind of go out and have a think about and look at today? What would they be?
Yeah, absolutely. I got a great answer for this. One is to run Locksmith. Locksmith is a free tool. It's an Active Directory certificate services auditing tool.
Right.
It will find all of the issues that I talked about. It'll find all like 19 different issues for ADCS.
Great.
It gives you a nice, Excel spreadsheet report. And the author of that is Jake Hildreth. He's a friend of mine.
Cool.
I'm a former contributor to the Locksmith project, but what's cool is he has a project called Locksmith 2 coming out. It's also a free project. It's on GitHub. And you can just search Google for Locksmith 2. It's a really great tool. And that's something I encourage everybody to go out and just run today. It's a safe tool. You just run it on any domain joined system, and it'll show you all your ADCS issues. And that way you at least know about them. And it'll also give you remediation advice and steps for that. So Locksmith is a super great tool, and it's something you can go out and run today.
Good.
The other one is a deleg or a deleganator. That one will find misconfigured permissions. So this one's a little bit more difficult because you have to know what to look for. But a deleganator is a tool that I wrote, and it's a wrapper around a deleg. And again, you can find all this on GitHub, and we'll make sure there's links and stuff for this. But a deleg is an Active Directory delegation management tool, and it'll show you when you open it all of the non-default delegated rights in your environment. So that example where I showed where it's like help desk has, full control over some admin group, you'll be able to see that with this tool, and it'll call that out. And it'll call out a lot of common misconfigured permissions that you would normally find in Active Directory. So those are 2 like really free tools. But beyond that, in terms of like strategy, one thing I highly recommend is auditing your admin accounts and anything that has domain admin rights, anything in like the built-in admin groups. Start there. Audit your most privileged groups first. Take a look at that and make sure there's no inherent privileges or permissions kind of laying around, or accounts or groups that have permissions over those groups, right? And that's the first place to start, because once an attacker gets an admin account, it's game over after that, right? If you can prevent them from getting an admin account and you still have an incident, like that's best case scenario, right? If Susie gets compromised and a couple other workstations get ransomwared, cool, I'm good with that, right?
Yeah.
If they get admin, like all bets are off.
Now, may sound a bit gory, Spencer, but tell me about like a real world example of what you've seen as a result of like maybe someone not taking your advice.
Yeah, so I have a lot of examples. One example, probably the most compelling, would be we did a pen test for a university here in the States. And that university, it started as an external pen test. And we noticed that there was a way to enumerate student IDs. So we could actually figure out what the student IDs were. And they were like a random number kind of thing. But it had a method to it, and we could enumerate all the student IDs. Well, we also noticed that there was a like a remote access page that we could log into, something like VMware Horizon, if you're familiar with that.
Yeah.
So students could log into this and get access to this lab network, right? To do, lab-based things, computer science and data analysis and, all that stuff. So we enumerated the student IDs, we password sprayed that VMware Horizon portal, we got account, and we logged into the lab network. The very first thing is like, that's when my team tagged me in. I'm like, okay, cool, tag me in, let's go. So the very first thing I did was I curb roasted. And there was one account. It was the built-in domain administrator account. So this is the admin account when you create a new domain. It's the RID 500, they call it. The built-in administrative account was a service account. So I curb roasted that account. I cracked it, I think, within like 3 seconds. It was like an 8-character password. It was like, boss man 123 or something. It was like silly, right? And I was able to get admin credentials, right? So an external pen test went to an internal pen test, and because of this weak password on the built-in admin account, I had completely compromised the environment, and the client didn't even know it had happened because we started externally, right? Like obviously we got permission from the client and all that, but like if that were a real attack, right? The client would have never saw it, never knew it happened. And that was just out there waiting to be kind of found by an attacker. But hopefully, fortunately it was found by us. So that was one of the most glaring ones. The other one that I think is really interesting is like very in contrast to that. I was doing a pen test for, I think it was a law firm. And in the kickoff call, they were like super confident, like, we have 20-character passphrases. There's no way you're going to crack anything. I mean, you could try, but like, we're good. Like very super confident, right? I go in there and I was able to capture hashes because they had something called LMNR enabled. And LMNR, just high level, it's like precursor to DNS. Essentially just allows you to capture hashes from users that authenticate. So I captured those hashes and I actually cracked 4 20-character passphrases. And the silly thing is they were using, popular song lyrics. They were using Bible verses. And the downside of that is you could just create a word list with all of these popular songs, and it's even easier now with AI. Just give me a list of the 20-character lyrics from the top 1,000 most popular songs or whatever. You feed that to a word list, and you just iterate through it with your cracking tool Hashcat, and there you go. So those were 2 of the kind of like the most embarrassing ones, kind of like most significant ones that I remember.
I imagine. Yeah. I mean, it must be really satisfying when you go in there and you're able to crack it. It must be, it must be quite a buzz.
It is. It's very much like an adrenaline rush from like the attacker side of things.
Yeah.
And it's something that I kind of coach and mentor our junior pen testers on, is that, I have to remind myself that we're here for the client. We're not here to just like completely own them and like destroy their environment. We do need to be thoughtful about how we present the findings to them and how we communicate these things to them, because it can seem combative, right? Or like kind of red versus blue. but we do it to help make organizations better.
As per your t-shirt, you're an ethical threat.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Spencer, I've really enjoyed taking the time to talk to me. Thank you so much. I really think our audience will get a lot out of the information you've given. So thank you so much. Really appreciate your time, and yeah, enjoy your afternoon.
Yeah, I appreciate it, and thanks for having me on. Hopefully, I don't know, maybe the sun is breaking in your background. I don't know if I can see.
The other
I
way
don't know if
around,
we're
actually. Yeah, we're getting towards like 4:30 now, so it's yeah,
getting to be afternoon. So yeah,
yeah. I mean, we only get like 3 hours of sunlight a day here.
yeah. But I appreciate you having me on. This is a great conversation. I love talking about Active Directory, obviously. And I think what you guys are doing is so important, and the tools that you guys have and kind of the methodology and the mission is so important, because Active Directory is not going away. And while it's here, it's important to keep it guarded and keep it protected. So I appreciate.
And that was that. Yeah, thank you. I want to thank Aidan and Spencer for taking the time earlier today to record that conversation for us, so that we get a real amazing insight into real world AD issues, real world examples of how breaches happen, and the importance of protecting your AD. Obviously, Spencer mentioned a free tool that he's a big fan of. We also have some free tools that we've developed here at Lepide. You can just go to lepide.com. You'll see the free tool link in our menu. We have one specifically focused on admin users in AD. I recommend checking that one out. If you're a Lepide customer on the session, obviously, you know that report exists within the data security platform. AD admin users, and you can dive in and check how your users are getting admin access, whether they should be. But yeah, if you have any Active Directory related security initiatives that you want help with, please do hit us up. Fill in the demo request form at lepide.com, or just send me a note, send me an email after the session, or even just comment on the session, and I'll make sure to get that set up for you. But thank you for everybody for taking your time out of your day to check out this conversation. I hope it was useful, and yes, we'll hope to see you on the next one. Thanks, everybody. Goodbye.